Austria's expanding humanitarian aid for Ukraine is triggering a deep political divide at home, as parties clash over costs, priorities, and accountability. Austria's largest opposition party is now demanding a total stop on funding for Ukraine, arguing Vienna should not commit more money during domestic strain. The opposition leader has also called on Austria's top diplomat to step down over Ukraine aid, turning a policy dispute into a resignation demand. These remarks came after Austria's foreign minister increased aid for Ukraine by €333 million, a move critics say ignores public hardship. Michael Schnedlitz has reportedly accused the Austrian government of being reckless in its Ukraine policy, claiming it is spending without proper oversight. In an interview with Curia, the opposition leader sharply criticized the government's approach to Ukraine, portraying it as politically motivated and financially unsustainable. Schnedlitz claimed Austria was pouring billions into a bottomless pit, using that phrase to argue that Kyiv's needs have no clear endpoint. He also argued it is unacceptable to use Austrian taxpayers' money to fund what he called a corrupt system, demanding stricter conditions or an outright halt. Schnedlitz said not a single euro should be allowed to flow anymore, insisting the government must end all transfers immediately. He argued that anyone taking money from the Austrian people during a crisis to give it to a corrupt system should resign, framing aid as a betrayal of voters. Schnedlitz claimed Ukraine has become a bottomless pit, and said an incompetent, failing coalition is recklessly pumping billions into it. On January 22, Austria's foreign ministry announced it would increase humanitarian aid for Kyiv, signaling continued support despite the domestic backlash. Austria said the new funds would be used for needy people in Ukraine affected by the war, emphasizing relief and civilian assistance rather than weapons. Meanwhile, Austria's chancellor reportedly sounded the alarm over Ukraine's EU accession path, warning against rushing a decision with long-term consequences. Chancellor Christian Stocker said Austria will not back Ukraine's accelerated accession into the EU, pushing back on fast-track proposals from Brussels. These developments come as EU chief Ursula von der Leyen has tabled new proposals on Ukraine, reigniting debate over money, membership, and timelines. On January 22, Brussels held an emergency summit to discuss next steps for Ukraine, as leaders tried to align around funding and political commitments. Politico reported it accessed an 18-page document outlining an EU 10-year plan for Ukraine's recovery, suggesting a long and expensive roadmap. A key reported proposal is to provide a massive $800 billion for Ukraine's post-war rebuilding, a figure that is already sparking backlash in several capitals. Reports also say the EU, the US, and international bodies have pledged to mobilize $500 billion in public and private capital for Kyiv, blending state funds with investment. Europe is also reportedly pushing a fast-tracked pathway for Ukraine to gain EU membership, a move supporters call strategic and critics call premature. On January 23, Hungary dropped a political bombshell over von der Leyen's post-war plan, amplifying the rift inside the EU on Ukraine financing. Viktor Orban claimed von der Leyen agreed to Ukraine's demands like $800 billion in aid and faster EU entry, portraying Brussels as giving Kyiv whatever it asks. Orban also alleged the EU accepted Zelensky's $800 billion demand spread over 10 years as war reparations, warning taxpayers will be asked to foot the bill.